Greetings everyone. This week in our Sunday Bible study we will continue on our journey through the book of Exodus, chapters 5 to 7. This is the part where Moses goes down to Egypt to ask the Pharaoh to let my people go. Very famous line. Now, how can Moses, after this long dialogue with God, where there's a back and forth, where he's called and he resists, he hesitates, he has lack of self-confidence, and finally he goes, how can Moses, who's wanted for murder, go back to Egypt and face Pharaoh without any consequences? Well, the main reason for this is that we see that the Pharaoh has actually died and there's a new Pharaoh. And to understand Egyptian law, ancient law, when there was a new Pharaoh came in, there was like a great presidential pardon, like a jubilee year, where all those who had committed crimes, especially capital crimes, the slate was wiped and they were forgiven and they were released from prison. So we see that Moses doesn't have to worry about being arrested, because even though he was wanted for a crime of murder, because of a new Pharaoh in town, his crime had been wiped away. And I think two words sum up these two chapters is freedom and worship. Now, freedom is a very central theme in the book of Exodus, and obviously it's about a political freedom. And a lot of the movies you will see, whether it's DreamWorks, The Prince of Egypt, or Ten Commandments, highlight much more the political freedom. But when you look at the text itself, the real freedom they're looking for is actually obviously political, but so they can worship. Let my people go so they can worship. So religious freedom is actually the heart of the book of Exodus, the freedom to worship. Now, we enjoy a lot of freedoms in our Western world, and it's good to be free. But as John Paul II said to President Reagan, when he welcomed him to America the first time he went there, President Reagan said, "Welcome to the home of the free and the brave." And Pope John Paul II said, "Oh, good, free, but for what?" And it's true. The people of Israel are free from Egypt. They get free from Egypt, but for what? So we enjoy freedoms here, but how do we use our freedoms? It's not just freedom in itself is good, but you have to use this freedom. And actually the ultimate freedom is a freedom to have a relationship with God and to get closer to Him and to worship Him. Did you ever wonder why the sacrifice of animals was so important for the people of Israel? It comes back to this, is that for the Egyptians, the animals, especially certain animals, were quasi-divine, a deity. So to sacrifice them was scandalous. It would have even been a capital punishment. They would have probably been put to death for it. So they had to leave the country to do it. And that's why they were asking for this freedom to accomplish the cult. But also it's symbolic because, as we saw last week, the Israelites were addicted to polytheism. And so to sacrifice those animals would have been painful for them, because it meant they were saying, I do not believe anymore in these gods present in these animals. And that's why we do a sacrifice. So interesting to see the origin and the meaning of the sacrifice of animals, which of course we don't do anymore. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, but the people of Israel were so busy, they didn't have time to worship. And Pharaoh kept the pressure on them so they could work, and not have to worship. But interestingly and fascinatingly, the word Avad in Hebrew can mean both to work and to worship, depending on the object. So the play on words here is, will you work for Pharaoh, which is slavery basically, or will you work for God, which is worship? So let my people go so they can serve me. Avad me means let my people go so they can work for me, which is to pray. So the big question is, in this part of the book of Exodus, is will Israel work Avad for Pharaoh, or will Israel worship Avad for God? And I think it's a question asked of all of us, is are we addicted to our own work or whatever, and the space in our life as well, the balance between work and prayer and worship.